Is it time to say goodbye to Scotland?
A year ago, I was sitting with you in Butte House, so simple big picture terms, and England had voted one way on Brexit, Scotland had voted the other way, and therefore it seemed pretty clear, and certainly clear to you, that this was a parting of the ways, and independence for Scotland was an inevitable result of all of this. And yet things have changed badly
Well,
this year for your point of view. Why?
I'm not going to say anything different, and you wouldn't expect me to. I still believe independence is the best future for Scotland.
Scotland voted to remain. The Brexit referendum was only 2 years after the Scottish one. The SNP are still the third biggest party in the UK. The UK might not even get a Brexit deal, meaning Brexit might just not be that good after all. And most importantly, Brexit doesn't solve the issue that Scotland feels forgotten about politically and economically from Westminster. So, goodbye Scotland. But wait, as somebody from Northern England, there's one thing I remember most about the first Scottish referendum, that those in the north wanted to go too. Why? Because they were equally fed up with austerity being imposed by the metropolitan elite. So the government imposed devolution, and now there's mayors and potential alternative prime ministers everywhere, making Whitehall weaker. Ultimately, that's how Brexit evolved. A weak prime minister, a reputation for austerity and betraying promises, an undemocratic establishment, and people feeling left out. But the Scottish referendum also made sure that Scottish people were given a vote with the power to completely wreck the UK, while the English, Welsh, and Northern Irish had no right to reply. This made the English and Welsh especially angry, and more likely to vote to leave the undemocratic European Union when finally given the chance to vote on something that wasn't just a general election between the unlikable Labour and the Conservatives. For the Scottish independence referendum, independence was a step too far at the time, but for Brexiteers, independence almost wasn't far enough. They wanted to see the entire establishment and the EU collapse because of New Labour, Tory austerity, and liberal elitist politics which imposed rules but didn't change for the better. For the English, for the working classes, for the older northerners, for people feeling left out by the entire political establishment. When the UK chose Brexit, the EU remained resolute on its Brexit proposals, but the UK failed to decide what to do next. By the time of the 2017 election, the SNP were promising a second referendum on the basis that Scotland voted to remain in the EU, therefore should be an independent country. But because being an independent country and leaving the EU was a contradiction for many, the SNP lost seats to the Tories. But once again, we are in a situation where a weak Prime Minister with a reputation for austerity is undemocratically imposing her Chequers rule on the country, meaning we have to leave the EU, we have to leave on her terms, and we have to accept those terms in order to avoid a no deal. So now a new wave of forgotten voters is rising up, the Remainers, those who want a people's vote with an option to remain. When a second Brexit referendum is offered, it gives justification for a second Scottish referendum. When Remainers express fears about leaving the EU, it gives support for the idea Scotland would be better off in the EU on its own. But had the Brexit vote originally been a vote to remain, none of this would have happened, because at the heart of the problem is forgotten voters and referendums. When a referendum is offered, it gives a chance for those who aren't party aligned to voice their opinions on a particular topic in a binary vote. The idea is that yes gets enacted and no doesn't. The Scottish stayed away from voting yes the first time around because independence meant smaller, harder, more complex existence in an already divided country of Scotland, so the campaign focused on the question of yes to what? But the Brexit referendum was a much simpler leave or remain vote, so the campaign focused on why leaving, changing, transforming a country is better than staying the same. The Scottish are also much more culturally British than the British are European, because that's as far as most people travel on a regular basis. But because of its simplicity post-referendum, there has been many complexities and confusion of what Brexiteers actually voted for. What terms do we leave on, how and when? The reaction to the Scottish referendum was much more nuanced, however. The government knew a strong minority of people wanted independence, but the majority felt it too risky. So devolution was created, and most things were kept extremely similar. Now the government knows the majority want to leave the EU, but a minority feels it too risky. This is a much harder situation to negotiate. Leaving an institution is a simple action on the face of it, but negotiating the terms of that divorce with all these different opinions is difficult. How do you portray that you're leaving without creating risks? So the Chequers proposals aims to do that. But the SNP hate Chequers because it aims to take us out of the single market and customs union. They would have you believe that leavers reside in England and Wales and remainers are Scottish, and therefore Scotland should be allowed to stay in those institutions, which is impossible without breaking up the UK. But either way, deal or no deal, Brexit doesn't solve the fact that some Scottish people feel left out by the government. Support for an independent Scotland is growing, but for the moment, the SNP are waiting on the outcome of the deal before deciding on whether or not they can and will offer a second referendum. In the meantime, lots of other things are likely to happen and change for the entire UK. But with a country with so many divisions, it's impossible to predict what will happen. But do you agree with me? Join in the debate below and subscribe.